Good morning, Grace Point, and welcome. It's good to be with you this morning, even if we're doing so virtually. My name's Tara Hamilton, and I attend Grace Point with my 4 children. It's the place that I call home, and I am so grateful to be with you this morning. We have wonderful opportunities to gather, and this morning we're doing that. And yes, it's virtually, and yes, it's a little bit different, but we're going to continue to do that as long as that's what's recommended to us by the CDC. It feels good and right to love our neighbor in really practical ways, and that's what we're doing by meeting virtually. So thank you for being here, whether it's your first time or your 400th time. We're happy to have you, and I am so very grateful for this community and the light and love that it brings to the world around us.
Welcome to Grace Point.
We are a progressive Christian church.
A safe place to deconstruct or reconstruct.
To question and to grow. We are welcoming, affirming, and fully inclusive.
Regardless of age, race,
Sexual orientation, gender identity,
Physical abilities, or marital or economic status.
we strive to rejoice in our belovedness, serve our community,
Respect our differences.
and love each other well.
We are people who accept and value you for you.
We are Grace Point.
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 Grace Point.
Good job. We are Grace.
No, just me.
We are Grace Point.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
God, oh God, great and holy, fearing not we come to thee, fearing not the weak and lowly, for your love has set us free. And by the blue sky bending over, by the green earth's flowery home, teach us, Lord, the angel chorus, you are love and love alone. 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 You are. Though the worlds in flames should perish, sun and stars in ruin fall, trust in thee our hearts should cherish. O Lord, be our all and all. And with your name the heavens praising, angels hymn no sweeter tone than the songs our hearts are raising. You are love and love alone. 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 You are. Oh, 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 oh. How perfectly our hearts are made for love. Oh, how perfectly our hearts are made for love. perfectly. Our hearts are made for love. You are love and love alone. 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 You are.
Good morning, Grace Point family, and hello to each GP kid and GP youth who are watching. I hope you are all doing really well. I know the news regarding school has been a lot to process this week. Know that I am thinking of you, I'm here for you, and I'm ready to support you however I can. Social interactions are such a very sweet treat these days. Our family really looks forward to the GP Kids and GP Youth weekly Zoom gatherings. Teens gather every Friday at 7 p.m. to hang out and to catch up. GP Kids gather every Saturday at 12 p.m. to hang out, to catch up, and to have a whole lot of fun together. Every Thursday at 7 p.m., I grab a book from our GP Kids collection and go live with a virtual story time. This week I'll be reading a wonderful book by the amazing Oliver Jeffers called Here We Are, Notes for Living on Planet Earth. I hope your families will join us for one, if not all, of these wonderful opportunities for community connection online this next week. Parents and caregivers, I've posted our newest discussion guides to our Grace Point Kids and Grace Point Youth Facebook groups. Check out these groups ever so often to stay in the know. You're also welcome to pose questions to these groups, share resources in these groups, and to connect as a community in these groups. I'm also emailing out these resources each week. If you'd like to be a part of our Facebook groups or you'd like to be a part of our email list and you're not, simply email me at lisa@gracepoint.net and I'll make sure to include you. And if your kids would love to receive some snail mail or a FaceTime call or a video message or a phone call, let me know and I would love to make that happen. With Earth Day coming up, this Wednesday, April 22nd, our discussion guides for the next 2 weeks will discuss enjoying and caring for our beautiful Earth home. This week we talk about enjoying the Earth. To enjoy means to have an inner experience, to be in joy as our bodies and our minds engage in an experience. Even now, we can find creative ways to enjoy our Earth home. I know many of you are making loving choices for our community and our Earth home. Thank you. Peace out, air hugs, and so much love to each and every one of you.
I wanted to share with you all some additional opportunities to connect with the Grace Point community virtually. It's really fantastic that we have so many opportunities even while we can't be together. Thank you, Lisa, for all of the ways that you're serving our children and youth right now. It's really unbelievable, and as a parent, I'm super grateful. The best place to get the most up-to-date information is on our website at gracepoint.net/calendar. That's updated very regularly, and you'll be able to see all of the opportunities. If something's missing, you can let us know, and we will add it. Every Tuesday, Josh is having a Q&A on Facebook Live, so you can join him there at 2 o'clock. In addition to that, every Wednesday night, we have something called Reconstruct. You join through a Zoom link, and this is a time where we ask questions. We have hard conversations. It's a place to be curious and wonder and question, and it's just a place to get to know each other better. And that's called Reconstruct, and it happens through Zoom every Wednesday night. An additional opportunity we have coming up that I'm super excited about is with Dr. Diana Butler Bass. She is an American theologian. She is an expert in American Christianity, and we have the distinct pleasure of having her leading our next Books and Brews, which happens Tuesday night, the 28th. I'm super excited. I am listening to the audiobook now, and I'm just blown away. It's a book called Grounded, and we'd love to have as many of you want to join us as possible. We are in unprecedented times, and although we can't always see the work that's being done at Grace Point, we know that it's happening. Our staff are working harder than ever, in more unique and challenging ways than ever, to continue to lead this community in grace and love. I know if you're here that you already appreciate or will very soon appreciate what a progressive Christian community can mean. It can mean a safe place to reimagine a faith that is so important to you. Part of the way we're going to be able to continue to do this is to give back. It's important that the community support itself through connection and Facebook Lives and virtual Books and Brews, but it's also important that we give back financially. This is a hard time for a lot of people, and if you've lost a job and you need support and help, then we're here for you. If you are fortunate and are still working and you have the means to continue to support Grace Point, we ask you to do that. The work that we're doing is important. The lives that are being changed and touched are important. We have this opportunity now to reach so many more people by being such a virtual community, and we want to continue to do that. There are a couple of ways that you can give. One of them is by going to our website where you can find the donate button. Another way is by texting Grace Point with an E to 77977. We would love to have you support us. We are grateful for you, and we hope to see you at one of the many opportunities to join with us virtually in the coming week.
Standing on this mountaintop, looking just how far we've come, knowing that for every step you were with us. Kneeling on this battleground, seeing just how much you've done, knowing every victory was your power in us. Scars and struggles on the way, but with joy our hearts can say, yes, our hearts can say. Never once did we ever walk alone. Never once did you leave us on our own. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. Kneeling on this battleground, seeing just how much you've done, knowing every victory is your power in us. Scars and struggles on the way, but with joy our hearts can say, yes, our hearts can say. Never once did we ever walk alone. Never once did you leave us on our own. hearts can say. Never once did we ever walk alone, carried by your constant grace, held within your perfect peace. Never once, no, we never walk alone. Never once did we ever walk alone. Never once did you leave us on our own. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. Every step we are breathing in your grace. Evermore we'll be breathing out your praise. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. You are faithful, God, you are faithful. You are faithful, God, you are faithful.
Good morning, Grace Point. I am so glad you're joining us this morning as we are gathering online for week, whatever it is, of this new normal that we're living in right now. You may have heard last week on social media, I shared some stuff in the Grace Point group, and then we had some Grace Point page shared some information. We are pausing the series we've been in for the last several weeks, where we've been reimagining, reframing, and reclaiming the language of faith. And we're going to begin a series that's going to run for the next several weeks called Meaning Making, trying to make sense of things that don't. And so what's going to happen is today I'm going to just share an introduction of sorts to the series. And then I'm collecting questions, the questions that you, our community, are currently processing, wondering about, thinking about. And over the next several weeks, I'll be responding to those questions and offering whatever insight I can into those. But I want to begin today with just sort of setting the stage as from the perspective of the Christian tradition. Because these are really, really heavy times. They're hard times. These days are difficult. They're difficult because as of the recording of this message, there have been more than 2 million cases of COVID-19 in the world, 677,529 here in the U.S., and 35,394 people in the U.S. have died as a result of this virus. So these are dark, heavy days. There's sort of this collective fog that seems to be hanging over everyone and everything, this collective grief that we're all swimming in all the time. I recently, last week, for the first time really since the lockdown had happened, I went into a grocery store and I went in there with my mask on and I went in there to get in and get out and to get the items we needed as quickly as possible. And as I walked in there, I hadn't been around a lot of people at all, and there weren't a ton of people in there. But just seeing people pushing their carts and going from the fruits and vegetables to the dairy, like whatever they were doing, there just seemed to be this like heaviness on them. Everywhere you looked, there was, and people sort of regarded each other with a little bit of fear, right? Like trying to keep distance like we're supposed to, 6 feet. And now there were people in there who weren't wearing masks. There were people in there who weren't social distancing, but everybody sort of looked at each other with some sense of suspicion, and for good reason, right? Like this virus gets transmitted through contact. And so as I was in there, I just remember looking around thinking, all of us are so sad and we're not sure where to put it and we don't know what to do with it because we aren't really even sure necessarily what's happening. And so there's a heaviness, there's a grief, and there's a fear. And that's just with the virus itself. But the other things that this virus has done, sort of the other dominoes that have fallen, have brought even more of that heaviness. Lots and lots of people have lost jobs, so there's the concern around money and the economy. This is taking a toll on our mental health. This is bringing all sorts of worry, either because we have loved ones or because we are people who are going out, having to go out and continue to work like nurses and doctors and first responders and restaurants and food delivery services and grocery stores. And people who run liquor stores, right? Like I read this week that liquor sales are up 20%, and I was like, only 20%? Right, but there are people who are still going to work every day and they're still having to interact with people. Some of us are interacting with sick people, and that brings a ton of worry not only for our well-being, but for the well-being of our families and friends that we may have to come in contact with. So this is bringing such a heaviness to all of us, everybody, is touched by this. And in normal moments, but especially in extraordinary moments like this one, we try to find meaning in our experiences. And I actually think making meaning, that search for meaning, the question of not just this happened, but like why did this happen, is a central part of what it means to be a human being. Viktor Frankl, the world-renowned psychiatrist, in his bestseller, Man's Search for Meaning, he actually said the search for meaning is the primary intrinsic motivation of human beings. I think what he's saying is looking for meaning, not just this happened, but what does it mean? What does it mean for us? What does it mean for my life? That is, I think, what it means to be human in some ways. I think we want to be, especially if we want to be fully integrated and whole human beings. And I think some of the angst we're all feeling is we don't really know where to put this. We don't have a category for it. This is such a new phenomenon. We talk about the new normal, but this is anything but normal. And we don't really know where to put it. If we have other experiences, we can, they're normal. We can fit them in. This is an abnormal experience. We don't know where to put it. But when we're searching for meaning, when we're getting to that why, or what do I do with it, or what happens now, one of the places we often turn to seek some sort of understanding is through the lens of faith. For lots and lots of people, they make meaning by taking their experiences and looking at it through the lens of their faith. So what does our tradition, the Christian tradition, specifically a progressive Christian tradition or lens, what does it offer us during these moments? And I think it's important to begin with the acknowledgement that the Bible was born out of trauma. I don't think we often think about that. We often talk about the Bible, and lots of people have them. It's apparently the best-selling book ever, right? This library of text, however, it came to us from an experience of human trauma. People wrote the Bible, and in their context or in their experience, one of the impetuses for one of the reasons they actually put this down into words is trying to make sense of their own trauma. For example, the community that produced what we call the Old Testament, or what's known as the Hebrew Bible, they were continually oppressed and occupied in their history, right? They were oppressed and occupied by Syria. They were exiled, deported from their land into the land of Babylon when Babylon conquered them. And after Babylon came Persia, and then came Greece, and eventually in the New Testament era, there came the Roman Empire. So much of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, was composed before, during, or just after their experience of exile. Right, when Babylon, the world empire, came in and destroyed their temple and collected the best and the brightest and deported them to Babylon, and everybody else was sort of left to just fend for themselves. But they were taken from their culture and their experience, and they were deported all the way to Babylon, and they were essentially given new identities. This is why often so much of the Hebrew Scripture was created, was to preserve their identity in a place that was trying to erase it. And some of the things they wrote is in this time when they just had their temple destroyed and they're living as strangers in a strange land, so much of their experience that they wrote about is just so full of grief. Listen to these words from Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and there we wept. When we remembered Zion, another word for Jerusalem, Israel. On the willows there we hung up our harps. For there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors asked for mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How could we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Listen to those words. By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and we wept. There we hung up our harps, meaning we can't play those songs anymore. And yet their captors are sort of jeering them on and saying, oh, sing us one of those nice songs that you sang back in the temple when you would worship your God. And part of this is that in the ancient world, there was this understanding that gods were tied to geography. And so for the Jewish community, their God was tied to the geography of Israel or Palestine, or what became known as Judea. And so if one group defeated another group, so when Babylon comes in and destroys the temple and takes Israel captive, it wasn't just that Israel had lost and that their way of life had ceased. It was that something else had happened, because ultimately the physical battle was sort of a representation of a bigger battle between the gods. And so in the ancient world, people believed if one group of people destroyed another or defeated another in battle, it was because their God defeated the other people's God in battle. So this is not just sitting on the banks of a river in Babylon weeping because life as you know it has ended. They're also weeping because their God, the God who they thought was mighty and powerful, the God who liberates the oppressed, the God who brought them out of Egypt from slavery, this God has been defeated. How do you keep singing songs about your God who has been defeated? I mean, that's their sense of exile. They have not only lost their way of life, but the thing that often people want to lean on to describe and explain these moments, they lost that. Their temple was gone. Their God was defeated, and there was nothing to look forward to. And there's a sense of hopelessness. Like, is it ever going to go back to the way it was? Is it possible that somehow something can be made out of this? Something can happen that transforms this moment? Or are we really going to sit by the rivers of Babylon weeping forever? It's interesting how ancient stories and ancient texts can actually say quite a bit about where we are today. And the way they came to terms or tried to come to terms with suffering, the questions like, where was God? How could God let this happen? Those sorts of questions. So they tried to describe why in their writings. And they produced books, like there's a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations. It's a book of poetry, and it laments the fall of Jerusalem. You have books like Ecclesiastes, and if you're really depressed, do not read Ecclesiastes. It essentially just says, at the end of it all, everything's meaningless, right? Like that's where the writer came up, what he came up with. And then there's books like Job that are really trying to make sense of suffering, and they really don't do a very good job of it. They do an imperfect job of it, I guess we should say, because the story of Job is a story of a man who had everything, and he loses everything, and his children are taken from him in an accident, and he's given a disease, and all this stuff happens. In the end of the book of Job, the writer says, but you know what? Job had more kids, and he got more stuff. And it's just, like what? Like getting more kids, great, but it doesn't replace the grief and the pain that Job and his family experienced over the loss of these other kids, right? So even in the scriptures, they're trying to make sense. What do we do with this? Where do we put it? How do we understand it? And they sort of take the Job offers maybe the perspective that we sometimes want to take, which is, we don't know, but let's just move on to happier times. But that really isn't how it works, is it? We don't just move on to happier times. And that's not just true for the Hebrew scriptures. This is actually also true for what we call the New Testament, the Christian scriptures. The New Testament is born also out of trauma. For example, Paul, one of the main figures in the New Testament, Paul, he has 7 letters that are genuine letters, which means scholars, beyond a shadow of a doubt, all agree that Paul wrote 7 of those letters that are attributed to him. Those 7 letters were written during times of hardship. Paul wrote many of them from prison. Paul wrote some of them from death row, knowing that his life was about to be taken from him. In the Gospels, which were written later, so Paul wrote in the 50s, the Gospels were written, the earliest Gospel, Mark, was written either in the late 60s or early 70s. And the pivotal event of that era was, again, the city of Jerusalem being destroyed and the second Jewish temple being razed to the ground by the Romans. There was a rebellion by some of the Jews, and Rome came in and crushed it. And so the Gospels that we know that tell the story of Jesus are either, Mark is either just before or just after, and all the rest of them come in the aftermath of life as they knew it being stamped out. They're written in the rubble of the fall of Jerusalem. Almost every page of the Bible has been impacted by trauma and loss. It's been impacted by the displacement of people. It's been impacted by life as they knew it and expected it and trusted it being completely demolished. And often when we read passages like in the Gospels about the end of the world, where it talks about not one stone being left on another and war and rumors of war, like that's not talking about the end of the world for us. It's describing the end of their world as they knew it. Those texts are about the temple, and they're either being in Mark written just before or just after, likely just after the temple was taken down and razed to the ground. The Bible, on every page, it seems, has been impacted by trauma. And so the tradition that we participate in, the Christian tradition, is familiar with sorrow and acquainted with grief. It isn't this thing that some is just to be cling, you know what I'm saying, to while we're essentially just looking to move on and be happy again. The Bible actually invites our lamentation. It invites our grief. It invites our questions. It invites our sorrow. And it actually has something to say to them, even if it's just me too, right? In some ways, when we read Paul's letters and he's suffering, when we read the Hebrew scriptures, the laments, and we read some of the Psalms that are just begging for help and no help is inside. Like we can connect with that. We can get that. We know what that feels like. And there's this version of Christianity that exists in the world that's sort of varnished and plastic, where everybody has a smile and every day's a Friday and everything's going to be great. And that if you are somehow grieving or crying, you experience loss and it's hard for you to move on. It's somehow you're not faithful enough, or you don't believe it enough, or you don't believe the right things the right way. There's this version of Christianity that it's almost like not feeling sorrow and sadness and not weeping is a badge of honor. I'll never forget when I was in my first pastorate in my hometown, my home church. I was the interim pastor there for a while. And I'll never forget being with somebody who's a part of that community who had just experienced a loss in his family, somebody he was pretty close to. And I remember the first time I saw him after that loss, I went up and I said, "I'm so sorry to hear about, the loss you experienced. Is there anything we can do?" And he stopped me and said, "Oh, no. I'm great. I'm so good. They are happy. They're in heaven with Jesus. Everything's perfectly fine." And I just remember thinking, that doesn't seem like a healthy way to respond to grief. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you believe about what happens when we die, I hope that's comforting to you. But that comfort doesn't take away that this was a real loss that leaves a real void that brought real pain. And when we sort of cast our tradition in the lens of, well, it's about joy and it's about happiness and it's about being able to trust and have faith. And if you do all those things in the right way, then you'll never be sad, you'll never grieve, you'll never be hurt because you know where the story's going. And that's just not healthy. And it doesn't represent the version of the Christian tradition that emerges from a Jesus who wept. I mean, if you look at the Gospels, Jesus in moments was celebratory and joyful. And there are moments at the grave of Lazarus or in Gethsemane facing his own death where Jesus breaks down and weeps. In the story of Lazarus is raised and Jesus still weeps, right? Last week we looked at a story of Mary Magdalene who's standing in front of the risen Christ, weeping because of the loss. We need a tradition that can hold all of the experiences of life, that makes space for our grief, that makes space absolutely for our joy, but that also recognizes that in Jesus, in the people who told the Jesus story, cast it in such a way that we have somebody who gets what grief is all about. So a couple things as we lean into this new series. First, I want you to know that you don't need permission to grieve, especially not ecclesiastical permission. You don't need a church, you don't need a pastor to tell you that it's okay to grieve. Your grief matters. And if anybody tries to tell you that it's unfaithful or that you just need to move on or that your questions don't matter, then they are not speaking through the lens of the Christian tradition that we have been given through the life and teachings of Jesus, because Jesus makes space for all of that. So I want you to know that you don't need permission to grieve. I also want you to know that I don't have answers. I know that sometimes pastors want to come off as if they have some sort of secret body of knowledge about this stuff that nobody else has, and I don't have answers, not objective ones that I can back up with data and say, look, if you do this, this, and this will help you move through it, or this will answer your questions, or this will put all the stuff, all the doubts. No, I don't have any of that. What I actually have is it's what T.S. Eliot called hints and guesses. I have experiences. I have some collected wisdom from those who've shaped me. And I think one of the things I have to offer is I have hope. And so those are the things I'll offer as I respond to your questions in these weeks. Not objective answers, not certainties, because those don't exist. What I'll try to offer is the most honest response I can to the moment and the worry and the fear and what we're all carrying around, the grief we're all carrying around right now. And 3, I want you to know that your questions are sacred. They are not sacrilegious. They are not to be hushed and pushed away. They do not show some sort of weakness in your faith. Actually, I think being able to ask questions shows that your faith is perhaps stronger than you've ever imagined, right? Because it has space for doubt, it has space for questions, it has space for the worry and the fear and the grief we're all carrying around. And then for what I hope I can ultimately offer is maybe some insights and ways of seeing this moment, ways of responding to this moment. And what I ultimately want to offer is perhaps for all of us, when we're prepared and when we're ready, maybe a place to begin to move into healing. And that's not where we are yet. We're not at Easter yet. We're still smack dab in the middle of a Good Friday experience. And so we don't want to rush that. We just want to make space for when we're ready, we're going to move into that. So next week, as we jump into the series full on, we're going to look at a story in John chapter 9 that seeks to understand God's role in the things that happen in our lives. Some of the questions I've been getting is like what is God's role? There's often some victim blaming that goes on with this. Well, if you'd done this, this, and this, maybe it wouldn't have happened. Or God's just trying to get our attention with this. Is that how God works? Is that what God's all about? Is that really a healthy, holistic way is that a God we even want to encounter? A God who just does stuff to us to see what we'll do, like we're like mice in a laboratory or something like that. I spoiler alert, I don't think that's what God is like. And so next week we're going to jump into that. And so my hope is if you have questions, if you have things that you're carrying around and wondering about, please, you can send those to me on Facebook, through Messenger, through the Grace Point page on Facebook, private message. You can email me at josh@gracepoint.net. And I would love to be able to respond to whatever it is. And again, my responses may be, I don't know. I don't know. But I'll offer whatever hints and guesses I possibly can. Grace Point, I miss you so much. I miss your presence. I miss your hugs. I miss the energy. I'm so tired of talking to a camera. But I really want you to know that as a community, what we're doing right now is saving lives. And you have been incredible during this time. Each week, our engagement has gone up. Each week, the number of views of our gatherings have gone up. You all have been generous. You have been kind. You really are showing why this is an amazing community to be a part of. And so from your leadership, we just want to say thank you very much. Thank you for the love, the welcome, the virtual hugs, what you're doing to help make this community not only exist, but thrive even in this time as we seek to make meaning together. So hope you'll join us next week. And if you have needs, questions, concerns, pastoral care needs, please reach out as well, because we still want to be there for you during these days. Thanks so much, Grace Point. Grace and peace be with you.